This is the video on teaching tips for the flute. The very first thing I'll do as the kids walk through the door on the first day of camp is I will pass out instruments to them for those that have rented instruments from the shop. But you're also going to have kids that walk through the door that have an instrument that they've brought from home. Now hopefully you've had a chance to try these instruments out before this day, but there's always going to be somebody that just comes as a surprise. So as they come through the door, be sure that you play their instrument, make sure it works. You don't want them to go through camp with an instrument that doesn't work. Also keep in mind that your grip is probably stronger than the kid's grip, especially if they're a 5th or 6th grader. Sometimes you may be able to play the flute and they might not be able to, just because you're shutting the pads a little tighter than they are. You want to make sure that you're checking to see if that's the case. See if you have to really bear down on those keys to get it to seal. If that's the case, you might want to suggest having it regulated. If they just can't do that, then you're going to have to tell them they're going to have to push down a little tighter. Anyway, I'll record their serial number as well before class gets started, and we're ready to begin. The very first thing I do is I teach them which side of the case is right side up. They're going to need to know that when they open it, or it's going to fall apart. So most of the time you're going to have the instrument label right here, and you'll notice that there isn't one on the bottom. Sometimes that's not the case. If that's not the case, they may have a label right here from where they rented it, and you just want to make sure that they have it right side up so they can read it. If that's still not the case, the top side of the case is generally narrower than the bottom side of the case. So that'd be the last thing to look for, and the latch is open upward. So most easiest thing is going to be is if they have that label there. Now, I have them put it on the floor. I don't have them put it in their lap, but since the camera can't see the floor right here, I'm going to go ahead and open it from my lap. And the next step is to just point out what the different parts of the flute are. We've got our head joint, we've got a foot joint, and then we've got the body of the flute. For this very first lesson, we're going to focus on the head joint. I tell all the instruments that they can look ahead, with the exception of the flute. With their first lesson, I never want them to look ahead. I want them to only do this when they get home. Don't try playing the whole flute. You've got to explain to the class that it's important that they not go on, because you can start developing some bad habits and get really frustrated too, because it's harder to make a noise on the entire flute than it is just the head joint. So for the first lesson, they're going to learn to make noise on this head joint, and they're going to practice that before the second lesson. I've had instrument tryouts prior to this, and I made sure that everybody that I put on flute was able to get a noise on this, especially if they were able to do it without even me showing them how or explaining it to them. If you watch my recruitment video, you'll see that was the case with a few of the girls that I tried out. Some of them I had to place it in the right spot for them to get a noise, and they were able to. So for this first lesson, we're teaching them how to find that correct spot and the correct way to hold the lips, and they're going to practice that at home. So the goal here is to get them to be able to go and like this. And for fun, now I used my pinky because my fingers are bigger. These little kids are probably going to have to even use their first finger to get it to stop the hole. Alright, so I start by describing the embouchure. I like to think of it the same way as a trumpet. Now with a trumpet you say and the only difference is the trumpet's a little tighter right here. Flute, you don't want anything to be really super tight. You want it to be more normal and relaxed, but still you're going to have to close off these corners here. So and some of the kids will suck their bottom lips in whenever they do this, and you're not going to be able to make any noise if that happens. So if that's the case, I tell them to pout a little bit, not much. Some of them are going to try to do that, just a little bit. Just relax that bottom lip. It should not be in. Okay, it should be more natural and full. And then you may have to go by the kid and place this in the right spot. This ledge right here on the bottom, the side closest to them, they're going to feel that right here, and it's kind of downward on the lip. So you're actually going to visually put that on their lip and have them blow across the top. Now whenever they blow, they're going to use the word poo, or I just tell them to whisper a letter P. That takes a little bit of practice for the kids, because some of them are actually going to go P, P. And you have to say no, it's blow right out of the center of the lips right here. Don't keep the mouth open wide like that. You're not going to get any noise. You want to focus that airstream in a little bitty hole right here in the middle. And we're just going to blow like we're whispering that letter P. Now as you're placing it on their lips, as long as you've tried them out ahead of time and they were able to do this, then it shouldn't be a problem. And I ask them, can you feel that ledge right there on your bottom lip? And they'll always say, yeah, they can feel it. And I say, well, memorize where it feels like it is. And then I'm having them do this with their hands on their lap. So I'm the one that's holding it and I'm the one that's finding the right spot. Now I say, okay, now you take it and put it back in that exact same spot. Feel that ledge on your bottom lip. And then you try to do it. Now it's going to take them a little bit of time usually to find just that right spot. You can talk them through it. And then their assignment is go home and practice to where they can just go like this. That's their goal for lesson 2. If they come into lesson 2 and they're able to do that really well, then it's time to move on. If they come into lesson 2 and they're struggling a little bit with it, you might want to take your helper and have them go into a different room and help them with it. A couple other tips. If somebody's really having a problem with this, you can use the kiss and roll. So you're going to hold this so that the hole is towards your lips, and you're going to kiss it so that you can feel the top one, the top ledge on your top lip, and the bottom ledge on your bottom lip, like that. And then roll it out. For some kids, that'll be enough to get it put in the right spot for them. Okay, that's kind of the last resort that I use. Now, hopefully by lesson 2, everybody's going to be doing that really well, and this kind of gives them something extra to practice, and you can even show them how to play Mary Had a Little Lamb, and that'll get them playing longer. Trying to do that. Alright, there'll be a little extra time in the class period. So, and notice in my sample schedule, this class is actually shorter than most classes because we haven't done much. We've just played on the head joint, that's it. With a little extra time, we'll show them how to put the instrument together. So, I always start by having them put the foot joint onto the body. And when they do that, you want to make sure that the rod right here lines up with the middle of this pad down here. You're going to have a lot of kids that try to line up the rods like that. That is incorrect. Your pinky will be in the wrong spot. So you want to line it up like that. And then we put the head joint on. You'll want to tell them this right from the beginning because it'll be hard to unlearn this. You never put the head joint in all the way. It'll be out of tune. We all know this. The kids don't know that though. You want to show them that you're going to put the head joint on with a little bit of extra down here, not shoved in all the way. And then later when we start tuning, that'll make more sense to them. But then, it's kind of like sighting in a gun. In fact, I have the kids do this the first few times that they're putting their flute together. You're just looking here and you see that the mouthpiece hole is straight in line with the majority of these keys. Now there's a couple that are going to be out of line there, but just right in line with them. And that's how you put it together. So, after that comes finger placement. There'll be a little bit of time at the end of class for this as well. And I emphasize to them, I'm going to show you where to put your hands, but then you can practice doing that at home, put them in the right spot. I don't want you to try to play the whole flute yet. It'll just aggravate them and cause some bad habits. So, very first thing here is knowing that you're going to have your hands like this. Okay, it's kind of like two sock puppets that are talking to each other. Your right hand is in a position as if you're pulling a book off a shelf. And as you go to grab that book, you'll notice that these fingers go together, and your thumb's right between the two of those. That's important. You're going to have a lot of kids that try to do this when they grab their flute. Not a good thing. Directly below those. And then your left hand looks back at you like this. So, left hand, you've got two buttons right here. You want to put your thumb on the big one. Show the kids that. Then, what they need to know is there's actually 5 keys right here. There are 2 of them that we don't use. This is confusing to the kids at first. A little tip that I learned in college in my methods class is draw this up on the board and then teach them New York, New York N, Y, N, Y, and you can even draw an N, Y, above this. What that stands for is no, you don't play that one. Yes, you do play that one. No, you don't play that one. And yes, you do play that one. So we're skipping the first and third one. No, yes, no, yes. A lot of times that'll be enough to get the kids to know where to put their fingers. Inevitably, you're going to have a couple of kids who just cannot figure that out through the course of camp. What I found to be helpful is to just take a couple of pieces of clear tape, doesn't hurt the instrument, and put those little pieces of tape on the keys that their fingers are supposed to go on if they can't figure it out on their own. So I'll put a piece of tape there, there, and there, and then when the kids go to put their fingers on it, they just find the ones that have the tape on it. After a while, they'll get used to the feel of it. You can take those pieces of tape away. I did have one kid that had to use them for a half a year. That's sometimes the case, but you do what you got to do. And so we show them where those three fingers go, and then we have our right hand. And remember, the right hand's like grabbing a book. We're going to use the bottom three keys here on the joint. So I always remind them that it's the bottom three. Just use those first three fingers, and then thumb underneath those two. Of course, you have your pinky there to help hold it up. And I'll demonstrate to the kids, and I'll tell them not to do this on their own, but I'll demonstrate that the pinky is only there to help hold the instrument up. Notice it doesn't change any pitches. Except for one. You're going to show them that if you play all the fingers, it changes that one. But let them know that the pinky is pretty well always there, except for that one note, just to help hold the flute up. Alright, after that, you want to make sure that they know how to do this at home when they go home. So you're going to have them at the end of class practice taking it apart, and they're going to have trouble right at first trying to figure out where all these pieces go, but you're going to explain to them that you can kind of tell by looking at the indentation there where different parts of the flute go, and have them try closing it. Tell them that if they can latch it with no problem, then they've done it right. If when they go to latch it, it doesn't shut, be sure to tell them never force this shut. If you don't, somebody in there is going to do that, and they're going to bend their flute up. Tell them that if they can't get the thing shut easily, and they have to force it, then something's in the wrong spot. Figure out what that is, adjust it, put it in the right spot, then shut it. Then ask them to put it back together on their own, but don't tell them, don't guide them, okay, unless you just absolutely have to. And I'll tell you what's going to happen. They're going to put it together, and they're going to be all proud, and then you're going to look and you're going to see that half of them in the class have lined up these rods they've forgotten. You've taught them a lot of information here in this first lesson. It doesn't seem like a lot to you, but it's a lot to them. And so you have to say, hey, remember that you're going to line up the bottom rod here with this bottom pad. And don't forget you're supposed to sight in the hole right here that you go through with the keys. Oh yeah, they'll remember once you show them that. And then have them put their hands back on it. Don't show them how. And some of them will try doing this. And, oh, no, remember the right hand here is like you're pulling a book off a shelf. Oh yeah. And kind of like two sock puppets talking to each other. They're looking at each other. Remind them about the no yes, no yes. It's going to be a lot for them right at first, but then have them take it apart and put it up. That'll be the end of lesson 1. Time to go home, play on the head joint as much as possible, come back for lesson 2. Alright, I always review everything that we've done in the prior lessons. So lesson 2, the kids come and they put the flute together on their own. And as they do that, you go around and you look to make sure everything's lined up correctly. And usually by lesson 2, everybody's lining everything up correctly. In fact, you're going to see some kids are going to go ahead and put their fingers right in the right spot, which is fantastic. That means they've been practicing on it at home. Some of them haven't taken it out of the case, so you got to remind them where those go. And maybe start picking out who you're going to have to put tape on the buttons for there. But at this point, we're going to talk about posture, and we're going to talk about how it's almost like you're standing from the waist up. We're also going to talk about how you're going to have to turn your chair just a little bit when you're playing the flute. Otherwise, your elbow is going to end up over the back of the chair. We don't want that. In fact, I always have the kids go a little bit of an angle so that the foot joint of the flute goes behind the head of the person beside them. That's hard for them to get right at first. they'll get the hang of it, as long as you start off with that. Okay, then we're going to talk about the fingering chart, and you're either going to draw it on the board or there'll be a slideshow of it, and it'll show them what it means whenever a finger is colored in and whenever it's not colored in. If they've played recorder up to this point, that should be a really easy concept for them because they're used to it. Then we're going to learn in this lesson the 5 notes by rote. I'm not going to show them what they look like on a staff yet. I'm just going to say, hey, this is a B flat. This is how you play it. We're going to talk about B flat. I saved C for last. We're going to do D, and E flat, and F, and we're going to drill those over and over and over again for the lesson. And I saved C for last because it's a little bit special. The kids have a bit of a problem with this right at first, but you have to explain to them that when you play a C, you're gripping onto the flute like this. In fact, I show them I can hold the flute up just like this. You might even have to take the kid's finger and bend it backwards like that and show them that it rests kind of like a seat right there and that they can grip it. A lot of the kids will get this right off the bat, and some of them are going to have some issues with it, and no matter what you do, they're still going to look like this. That's okay. Give them a little bit of time, tell them, make them aware of it, but over time, over a couple of months, they'll get the hang of it, because otherwise they're going to drop their flute. And you can show them, you can hold the flute up just like that. You've got your anchor points, you got your thumb, you got your pinky right here, and you've got that. And plus, it's a little easier whenever you actually hold this up against your face, okay? And by the way, there has to be a little bit of pressure there. It doesn't sit really, really lightly, loosely up against your face. You have to press in just a little tiny bit. And that helps hold the flute up as well. Okay, next, after we've learned these 5 notes and we've tried playing them, so now the kids have learned how to play the 5 basic notes, and it's going to be a bit of a struggle for them right at first. That's going to be their assignment, working on those 5 notes. We're going to teach them a song. Now the thing about the flute is, and you'll never want to tell the kids this, flutes start out a lot slower than everybody else, and the reason for that is just the first 5 notes that they give us in most of our method books. Not all method books are like that. Essential Elements is like that for the flute, unfortunately. There's some weird fingerings that they have to figure out how to do, and like going from C to D, for instance, you move every single finger. And it's not the case like that on other instruments. Think of a clarinet, you're just doing this, okay? Clarinets learn really, really quickly. They get far ahead of everybody else until they hit the break, and then they slow down. They come to a grinding halt. Flutes are the opposite. They're going to start really slowly, but then about halfway through the year, they're going to start flying ahead of everybody else. That's just the way it is every year. Be prepared for that. Your flutes will be behind the rest of your band. I keep them separate from the rest of the band right at first, for the first 9 weeks or so, and they don't have a clue that they're behind it. By the time they start to pick it up and figure out how to do it, and you put them in with the rest of the group, they don't realize they were behind it. But I want to get them playing something. I want to get them playing a song just so they can feel accomplished here after the second lesson. So we're going to teach them Mary Had a Little Lamb by rote. And we're going to use the same fingerings we would for a clarinet, which is boom, boom, boom. All right, B natural, A, G. And I'll even write the numbers on the board. I'll just say, hey, this is 1, 2, 3. Okay? 1, 2, 3. I'm not telling them what any of these notes are. I'm just telling us 1, 2, and 3. And then just show them. Depends on their embouchure. They might play low like that, or they might play up here. At this point, I don't care if they're playing high or low. I just care that they're playing a song, because that's going to get them practicing. That's going to get them blowing through the instrument on lesson 2, because they have something they can play at home for the people at home to listen to. And then I show them how to use the flashcards so that they can see at home what the fingerings are on the fingering chart that we just learned, and then they can be drilled on those 5 different fingerings. That's their assignment for lesson 3. When they come to lesson 3, we're going to introduce the staff, because by this point, the ones that have been studying along can play those 5 notes, and now we're going to show them what it looks like. So we see a picture of a staff, we see where those notes are, review what they've learned in elementary school about face and every good boy deserves fudge. And after we've done that, we've played through all 5 notes, see what they look like. I'm going to introduce tonguing. You don't want to wait too long in the year to introduce tonguing, because if you do, it's going to be something that's hard for them, and they're not going to want to do it because they're so used to doing it by puffing. So I always tell my elementary school music teachers that I want them to teach a couple of things. I want them to teach what all the note names are on the staff, and I want them to teach my counting system, which is 1, 2, and 3, and a 4. And the third thing I want them to teach is how to tongue on a recorder. If the kids have practiced tonguing on a recorder, whenever they come to you, this is not a new concept and it's real easy for them. On a flute, it's just the word 2. And I show that to them. And then you let the kids try doing that. And I'm not doing any written notation or anything here, just tonguing. Have them pick a random note, a note that's easy for them. For some of them that might be B flat, for some of them it might be F, whatever note's easy for them. And they're going to practice tonguing at home. You can play 4 quarter notes, and I'm not telling them the quarter notes yet. They don't know what that is. I'm just saying 4 notes on each one of the letters that we learned. Okay, and then they're going to have to change fingerings. It takes them a while to do that. You play 4 on each one of those notes. And then in lesson 3, we're actually going to start in the book. And you'll notice that number 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, the odd numbers are just those individual notes. So they can see what they look like on the staff. We can practice holding them out, starting a note with our tongue, and that's the end of lesson 3. You have to know your fingerings. These kids are going to have pretty well the right concept of their fingerings, but the note's not going to speak for some reason. And you're going to find out just because they're trying to play enough, but they've almost got it, but they have their first finger up, okay? It's just not going to work for them, and you're going to have to be able to tell them. You're going to have to fix those problems for them. Study your fingering chart. Learn these 5 notes ahead of time. In fact, I would recommend going through these videos yourself before camp. If you don't know the fingerings yet, learn and staying about a lesson ahead of them, okay? So you know what's coming up. That way you can catch these problems when they happen. For you brand new teachers, learn these instruments with them. It'll take a couple of years. It took me 3 or 4 actually before I got to where I was able to play everything at the level of my first and second year kids, and it took a couple more years to where I was able to play them at the level of first, second, and third year kids. But play along with them. Make sure you know your fingerings for these. All right, lesson 4. They've practiced their flashcards. For set 1, now we're going to introduce set 2, where they can do flashcards while they're seeing the staff, and we're going to practice changing notes because the songs that we're playing in the book now go from, say, F to E flat. While they're doing that, I tell the kids if they want to, they can put it on their knee and over their shoulder, and they can look and they can see, and they can practice doing it like that, okay? Sometimes it's helpful just to tell them what fingers they're moving. Like from the F to the E flat, they're moving this first finger and these 2 fingers here, and they just need to focus on those 3 fingers. Okay. So that's lesson 4. Not a whole lot there in lesson 4. And finally, in lesson 5, I'm going to explain to them the note drill that we're going to do later in the year. Show them the note challenge. They haven't gotten far enough ahead yet to actually do that. It's going to frustrate them if you try to do it. And the last thing is I'm going to show them is how to go from C to D. This is a tough one because they're trying to, first of all, remember how to play a C and grab it with their finger. But also, every single finger moves when you go from C to D, except for this pinky right here. Okay, that's the only one that doesn't do anything. And that's tough to do right at first. So I tell the kids, over the summer, you've got a couple months, I want you to practice doing that, and I want you to be able to do it on the first day of school when we start up. And that takes them through the entire camp. Flutes don't get very far, and they're going to kind of struggle over the summer as well. Some of them are going to take some private lessons, and they're going to get it, and they're going to get advanced ahead of the other kids, but expect the rest of them to be just barely learning those 5 notes and still kind of struggling with all the fingers just because of the combinations they're using. And that's flute.